Take a moment to review our objectives for today's session. As you can see, our focus today for this session is grounded in better understanding the implementation of core and optional activities in the updated 3-5 ELA Guidebooks units. We will begin today's session with an overview of the updated evaluation plan. This graphic shows the evolution of the ELA Guidebooks curriculum. The growth of ELA Guidebooks has been made possible because of continuous educator feedback. After the initial framework and 1.0 units were released, ELA Guidebooks 2.0 were developed based on feedback that teachers wanted help with pacing and structuring the content of the units in Guidebooks 1.0. Additional supports were added in 2018, again, in response to teacher feedback. The ELA Guidebooks 3-5 2022 updates focus on two main areas: writing integration and assessment design. The direct feedback from the field assisted the department in determining what updates to make to the ELA Guidebooks 3-5 2022. And we are very excited to continue to grow and enhance this English language arts curriculum that is truly made by teachers for teachers. Let's take a look at the lesson design that you're used to from the 2018 units and compare it to our new lesson design. As you review this table, put in the chat what stands out to you as a major difference. You can add in the chat any differences that you notice from the previous curriculum design to the 2022 curriculum design. All right, I see embedded writing activities and embedded diagnostics, core versus optional, embedded writing. Yes, absolutely. Overall, the ELA Guidebooks 3-5 2022 is still a knowledge building curriculum with text at the center. The big differences that you will notice are the addition of core and optional activities, incorporation of the writing revolution, and the embedded assessments. Today, our overall focus is on supporting teachers with selecting and implementing core and optional activities. Before diving into the core and optional activities, we will first explore the curriculum's writing integration and updated assessment design. One of the most anticipated updates is the integration of the writing revolution into the ELA Guidebooks 3-5 2022 units. We have partnered with the writing revolution to incorporate a strategic writing progression throughout the updated 3-5 ELA Guidebooks units. There are multiple opportunities for students to engage in the writing activities designed by revolutionaries who were trained by the writing revolution. The activities start at the sentence level and build to paragraph writing strategically through the leveled ELA Guidebooks units. Tara, if I could have you click on the writing progression plan or chart, I'm sorry. So the writing progression chart maps out the writing skills that are covered at each level for each grade level. The first time the writing activity is introduced, you will notice that the activity is core and outside of the unit content. This strategy is then followed by the next activity using the unit content. As students become more familiar with the strategy, the introductory activity becomes optional or is removed. Level 1 units begin with the sentence skills, note-taking skills, and outlining and paragraph skills. Level 2 units continue to build on the Level 1 strategies and introduce revising skills. By the time students get to the Level 3 units, they are incorporating all of the writing strategies that are appropriately aligned to their grade level. In Section 1, Lesson 2 of the Whipping Boy unit, we observe the following core and optional writing activities. Activity 7 is optional for the teacher to review the sentence and fragments activity using an out-of-content example. Activity 8 is a core and instructs students to practice revising fragments into complete sentences using content from the lesson's text. The teacher has the opportunity to include Activity 7 to provide additional practice, or omit it and practice with Activity 8. The assessment path for each unit can look different from classroom to classroom. With the built-in optional activities, teachers are able to choose which optional activities would best benefit their students. Every unit includes lesson look-fors for monitoring student progress, section diagnostics to assess student growth throughout the unit, and a culminating task to evaluate overall understanding of the unit. The evaluation plan now has 3 methods of assessment: monitoring, diagnosing, and evaluating. Monitoring student progress is embedded into the daily curriculum with student look-fors, which are knowledge-based and skill-related. The lessons in each section are designed to prepare students for the section diagnostic by building content knowledge through reading, writing, and having discussions about complex texts. The results of the section diagnostics help teachers understand how their students are progressing in the unit. At the end of the unit, teachers evaluate students using their writing responses to the culminating task. By monitoring how students are responding to the activities with the lesson look-fors and analyzing the section diagnostic data, teachers are able to make informed decisions about which optional activities to include in the lesson and which in-the-moment supports to use. So we've said a lot in a little bit of time, so I want to pause to see what questions you have about the updated unit assessment approach. Please feel free to unmute yourself, or you can put your question in the chat. And we do have other members of the ELA team monitoring the chat to answer any questions that arise. Okay, we have a question from Ada. Will the formatting change its look? Will it look more like the 912 format? It certainly will. It will look like the 912 format on the Louisiana Curriculum Hub. That's a great question, Ada. Is the writing progression chart currently available for use? That's another great question. And yes, or Allie, you can go ahead with that question.
Yes, it is. I can go ahead and drop that document in the chat.
Thank you, Allie. All right, and then Ashley had a really good question also. Are all the optional activities writing activities? So with the 3.5 updates, all optional activities are not necessarily writing activities. They're activities that, that anticipate some students might need some additional support based on their previous lessons work, whether it be the section diagnostic or what occurred in previous lessons.
There are also opportunities to continue to build background knowledge and to get students to be able to access the text as well.
Yes. All right. And yes, the updates are applied to all the units in 3.5. And then Sky asked, in the writing progression chart, you mentioned leveled units. How will we know which units are which level? And so we do have a document, an overview document that we will also place in the chat that will go over the leveling of the units. Sheba, that's a wonderful question. So are the writing activities aligned to the 3.0 units? So these units have undergone a rework. There were several reasons why, and some of it did include access to the text. Some of the texts were just no longer available. And so the units had to be updated and adapted to meet those needs. And so it has been a full overhaul of the units. All right, and I'm seeing that we're getting a lot of questions. I'm going to have Allie and Tara continue to respond to your questions in the chat. We are also collecting these questions to provide additional feedback should you need any additional support. So please continue placing your questions in the chat. So now we will begin looking at an overview of core and optional activities. Take a moment to review this quote published by Achieve the Core in the report, Reading as Liberation, an Examination of the Research Base. You can go back, Tara. Thank you. As we dive deeper into the core and optional activities, we want to identify this as a personalized learning opportunity for students, with teachers creating learning experiences that build upon their assets. The addition of core and optional activities allows educators opportunities to incorporate activities that provide all students with just-in-time supports to accelerate learning and meet grade level expectations. As part of the updated units, each unit includes core and optional activities that build knowledge, skills, and habits students need for the culminating task. The core activity supports and optional activities can be chosen based on individual student need to support students toward mastery of the unit goal. Core activities are indicated by a blue solid circle. You'll see those in the screenshot on the slide. And then optional activities are indicated by the open white circles. As previously mentioned, each unit section includes a diagnostic with checklists and exemplars in order for teachers to monitor student progress. The data collected from these checklists allow teachers to monitor student understanding to determine what in the moment supports students need to be successful on the culminating task. So let's explore an updated lesson for section 1, lesson 1 in Because of Winn-Dixie. So we're going to add a link in the chat for the Louisiana Curriculum Hub. And this is going to be section 1, lesson 1 in Because of Winn-Dixie. All right, so looking at this particular lesson, section 1, lesson 1 in Because of Winn-Dixie, what supports are included in the core and optional activities? So if we look, activity 1 is optional, and this activity builds background knowledge about humans and animals being friends. Activity 5 is optional, and this deepens students' understanding of Fern and Wilbur's relationship. Activity 3 includes specific page numbers to refer to for specific evidence. We know it's very important for our students to be citing their evidence, so they're getting additional practice here with that. And then in activity 3, it also suggests the use of conversation stems and the discussion reference guide. So then we have our next question. How do these activities support students on the section diagnostic? Well, the section diagnostic is how does the unusual relationship between Fern and Wilbur teach us that animals and humans can be friends? So these activity supports, they're building students' knowledge, they're helping them understand the relationships, they're supporting their understanding with text evidence, and they're having discussion opportunities to prepare themselves for any discussions to have as they go through this unit and in future units. So how do these activities support students in achieving the unit goal? Again, they're building background knowledge and they're building their understanding of relationships. So we walked through a lot in a little bit of time there. So what questions do you have about the optional and core activities?
While we're waiting on those questions to come in specific to that, I do want to go back to some of the questions that were asked in the chat. The first one is from Rebecca. She's asking if the diagnostic is a true diagnostic where we can assess student learning prior to the lesson, or is it more of a lesson quiz after a section? So that was a great question, Rebecca. The section diagnostics are true diagnostics to assess students where they are in understanding the knowledge and skills of the unit at that point. All of the section diagnostics filter student understanding to that culminating task. So each time you give that section diagnostic, students should be showing you a little bit more of a puzzle piece to be able to accomplish the culminating task. Another question here that I saw was there's many opportunities for formative assessments, but where could there be more opportunities for summative? So the summative opportunity that we have already embedded is, of course, that culminating task. Summative opportunities can be built out through other related texts in the unit, as well as using previous summative assessments that your teachers have already created. We do recommend that teachers do preview the updates in the units if you are planning to implement the updates before giving the assessments that were given previously, just to make sure they still align. We had some text changes in the units due to being out of print. So I do caution you to make sure you're checking that as well. Also, any of the assessment opportunities that were in the previous guidebooks, same caveat though, if you're using those, please make sure that you are previewing it first, previewing the updates, and then making sure they're still in alignment. If I did not answer either of those questions with enough detail that answers your question, please ask it again in the chat. Give me your email address and I'll make sure I give you a more detailed response.
Okay, and before we move on, Ada said, I do not see the PowerPoint that teachers project on the section 1, lesson 1 unit that we just showed. So Tara, if you don't mind going back to that lesson. She's clicking on section 1, lesson 1, and activity 1. You see that those arrows right there that Tara just clicked on? That will expand the student-facing content. So the teacher can show that to their students. That's what they would show. The teacher notes are hidden because, you know, that's for the teacher and not for the students. So those are the slides. They're not really slides, but that is the student-facing content for each activity.
So it does look different from previous. It's not actual Google Slides like it had been. And we do recommend that you have your teachers really look through this information and see what is needed to be projected and what may be just the students engrossed in the text itself. So make sure that you're having your teachers, as they're unpacking their lessons and their sections, really internalize, what do I need to have projected for the students, and what is just going to be a rich conversation in the class. There is another question that Ms. Williams put in the chat. Although diagnostics are considered true diagnostics, can teachers also use the scores for grades? That's going to be a district decision. Absolutely. Students are putting in a lot of effort to show what they know so far from the section. So that would be a good opportunity to assess their learning there. And then Victoria, you have a question about LearnZillion. We recommend that you reach out to LearnZillion and ask your questions specifically to them. They are in the works of creating a relationship with TWR to have these updates on their site as well. So I don't have a current timeline on when the updates will be available, but LearnZillion will be able to give you more information specifically on that. How would you be able to share student materials on the screen for students without sharing the teacher notes? So we do have, Tara, can you go back to the hub and go to Because of Winn-Dixie for a second? If you can click on home. Perfect. So can you go ahead and circle where the materials are at the bottom of this? Perfect. So the materials here are available for download, and you could definitely download these PDFs and have them available for teachers to be able to show to students that way. We also have a partnership with Xanadu where the materials can be printed and bound for your teachers to use as well. All right, if you have any other questions, please continue to put it in the chat, and Kenna or Tara will be happy to answer those as we continue on with the next part of our session. So the next part of our session is going to focus on supporting teachers with selecting and incorporating core activity supports and optional activities. During teacher collaboration, teachers should bring their data from the most recent student assessments. This data will support teachers in making instructional decisions for upcoming lessons and annotating these decisions in their lessons. Other conversations may be focused on studying the sections and planning for diverse learner populations. Let's take a look at the data collection tool. This tool helps teachers analyze data from the section Diagnostics and direct them to the knowledge and skills students are understanding. With this information, teachers can make informed decisions about which students could benefit from the supports identified in the lesson. So this is what we were referring to as far as the section Diagnostics. The teacher would take all of their student samples and they would look at the knowledge and skills that the students were able to show on their responses. With that, they would then decide, has the student successfully built the knowledge and skill? Is there something that may indicate needing some assistance with? Are there some missing pieces to some knowledge or skills? Or did they not really respond to the prompt? It did not give enough response to evaluate. Teachers could take this information and then build further out common areas of strength, as well as those in the moment supports that can help build those learning opportunities. Then teachers will take that information and create a plan to address their diverse learner populations. So this is one way that teachers would take information to create the plan. Now, this plan would involve teachers previewing the next section of the curriculum and looking at those opportunities as in the moment supports, as well as those optional activities. Which ones are going to benefit my groups of students to be able to access the text and create those learning opportunities. Next, we want to go ahead and talk about the section study tool to plan just-in-time supports and optional activities which equip students with the knowledge needed to successfully access the upcoming lessons and activities. This tool also helps teachers plan with the section diagnostic and culminating task in mind. Discussions around knowledge and skills specific to the section diagnostic focus conversations around the supports needed for students to gain the appropriate knowledge and skills needed for the section diagnostic. So in those collaborative moments that teachers have, that common planning time, we want to make sure teachers are using that time to look at data as well as internalize the sections to be able to understand which in the moment supports will best benefit their unique populations. So here, the section study tool is looking at the culminating task and then the specific section diagnostic for that section. Then teachers are taking the assessment like a student, and they're going to make a anticipated response and tag what knowledge students will need to answer the task, as well as what skills students are going to need to access that task. So this way, teachers are really honing in on those opportunities throughout the lessons as they roll out the section for students to understand what they need to do. Can you scroll down, please, Tara? The next portion of looking into that section is really digging into the text. Remember that ELA Guidebooks is keeping text at the center, and we want students to access that text as effective as possible. So teachers take the time to look at the text specific to that section, and they again look at the knowledge that is going to be pulled from that text, and then also identify those additional in-the-moment supports that students may need as they continue to access that text. And then finally, in that step 3, we're looking at those specific look-fors in each lesson that are going to help teachers monitor student progress and be able to identify what knowledge and skill from that lesson students are going to be using to get those little puzzle pieces together to access the section diagnostic and in turn later access the culminating task. Another common teacher collaboration discussion is going to be focused around supporting diverse learner populations. This guiding questions document helps teachers plan learning opportunities with the supports included in the curriculum. This step-by-step process guides teachers in creating an effective action plan for all of their students. So this is the process that is recommended for teachers to plan for those support of the diverse learning population. You can see that it goes through all of those supports that we just talked about previously, looking at the data, filling in all of the opportunities that you're noticing from your student samples in that data collection tool, previewing the lessons, internalizing the lessons, and understanding which core and optional activities are going to help your students access those texts and build the content knowledge as needed. And then also being able to identify supports, tools, resources, and creating that plan of action. So if you're looking for a process to follow in how to use these optional activities and core activities, this process will help gear teachers toward making those informed decisions based on their unique populations. We can go on, good, yeah. The section diagnostics assists teachers in determining how successful students will do on the culminating task. This means that understanding how to support students along the way is essential to planning at the lesson level. There may be times that require teachers to make adjustments to the lesson to meet the needs of their unique student populations. This means that the optional activities one teacher uses in his or her lesson may differ from a teacher down the hall. When these changes are made, teachers should justify the needs for the changes by providing rationale for the adjustments from their data analysis. This rationale should be annotated in an annotated form on their teaching guides that indicate the supports or optional activities that you should expect in the lessons.
Hey, Allie, before we move on, there was a question in the chat that I think would be a good fit here. Someone asked, how does the revised rubric fit into the section study tool, specifically the reading and writing rubric?
So when you are looking at your exemplar, creating your own exemplar, as well as looking at that section diagnostic, that's a great opportunity to study that updated rubric as well and identify those skills and knowledge that students are going to need to be successful on that rubric. We're now going to review some data that teachers would use as they plan for daily instruction. This would include selecting optional activities and the core activity supports to include in the day's lesson. Take a minute or so to review the data. What do you notice about these results? Add your thinking to the chart. To the chat, not the chart. You're looking at the chart. So think through those questions. What are some possible knowledge building opportunities? And what commonalities can be addressed?
Ellie mentioned in the chat that this is very similar to the diverse learner cycle module. And then Missy said she can use this to group students for small group support using this tool.
Absolutely. And also address like those bigger gaps too that you may notice in content building. So maybe you see like most of your students have some knowledge that needs to be reviewed. So this would also be an opportunity to address that as well. So we're looking specifically at what knowledge building opportunities do you see and what commonalities can be addressed? Absolutely. Thank you for adding that to the chat. Yes, it could show trends in students for supports and honing in on the content knowledge needed to be successful in the culminating task at the end. And it could be used to anticipate students struggling during instruction. Additional supports and diverse learners document. Shiva, what exactly are you referring to those documents being available? Can you give me a little more information?
Oh.
No worries, Shiva. Just go ahead and add it to the chat when you're able to. But yes, if we look specifically at this data, data here, we see that we have a group of students in that second column, and we also have another group of students in that third column. So honing in on that and looking specifically at the knowledge and skills that these students were able to show, we can see that this data shows that there's a group of students that need support with building their knowledge around Fern and Wilbur's relationship. When participating in this teacher collaborative conversation, you will want to hear your teachers looking for specific supports in the upcoming lessons centered around those character relationships. So when your teachers are looking at their documents and they're analyzing that data, this is the kinds of conversations you're looking to listen in on to make sure teachers are directing their attention to the next lessons that have those optional activities and core supports to be pulling in specific to their populations, those relationships in this case. All right, so with the class data that we just discussed in mind, let's look at section 2, lesson 1 of Because of Winn-Dixie. Let's go ahead and dig in to answer the questions on the slide. What core activity supports in section 2, lesson 1 would you indicate? And why? So I'm going to go ahead and pause for a moment and give you guys some time to dig in to that lesson. And I want you guys to keep thinking through, if I were this teacher and this was my data, what am I going to be pulling from this next section to make sure my students are getting the access to the text that they need? Please add your responses to the chat as you uncover some of those supports. Ellie asked a question in the chat about the recordings of these videos. They will be available on the Louisiana Believes website. Go ahead and check within 2 weeks of the first time these presentations are made, because they will be provided in the updates each week for the website. So you will be able to access those. I'm going to go ahead and drop in some specific links. Ms. Vermillion, you are asking if the core supports are optional. Those possible supports and guiding questions are provided for teachers to use as in the moment supports and to plan for those diverse learning populations. So if the supports are included on the in that possible supports in that core activity, those are for teachers to use as needed. I just dropped in some specific activities that you can look closer at to find some connection to this data that's on the slide. Ms. Laverne, I would love to go ahead and send you more information on the connections of those rubrics to the LEAP 2025 LAT. If you would like to also schedule a meeting, we can talk through that as well. All right, so I see that some of you have posted in here some opportunities for pulling in those optional activities as well as some core supports. So I want to specifically look at activity 3. Activity 3 is asking guiding questions, and these are some supports that could help set up the relationship with Wilbur and Charlotte. And asking guiding questions also in activity 5 discusses the ideas of friendships in the chapter. Providing a teacher model using the evidence tool in activity 5 for the student CC, VH, SS, JM, KM, SL, AS, TJ, MH, KS, and MC. That's how I would group that support for those students. Now let's look at that second question. What optional activities in section 2, lesson 1, would you include and why? So if we look at optional activity 1, we would include this one, but maybe change it to a whole group discussion first, and students respond to the questions after in their learning logs. These questions address how Wilbur is different from the other characters, which will lead them to better understanding how he interacts with them. And so you can look specifically at that activity at this link I'm dropping now in the chat. All right, Tara, we can go ahead and move on to that next slide. When you visit classrooms, the learning environment will look and sound different as each teacher is making instructional decisions based upon the needs of their students. There are some common look-fors that leaders can identify as they visit classrooms to ensure that their teachers are making informed instructional decisions. So these will include annotations being made in the teaching guide to support instructional decisions. Those annotations can include optional activities identified as included or omitted with evidence from student performance collected on the data collection tool. Identification of which additional supports from the core activities and or reference guides are being used in the lesson among other needed supports based on their unique student populations, and specified groupings based on student need for the particular lesson. So making sure that it's whole group, small group, read aloud, and so on. These groupings are fluid and based on student progress from previous lessons. So they should not be static, and the same student should not be seen every single day. They should be fluid and be reflective on the data. Effective implementation of activities would include implementation of core or optional activity supports to accelerate learning, students showing progress using the selected supports, and then those anecdotal notes to provide future supports if needed based on student performance. Feedback on the implementation of the core activity supports and the optional activities can help your teachers plan more effectively. When navigating feedback, ask teachers to reflect on the knowledge and skills of the task. Some suggested questions include, to support teachers in reflecting on knowledge building opportunities, you can ask, what knowledge was important for your students to gain from the lessons reading? How well did your students gain this knowledge? How well did you implement in the moment supports to build student knowledge? And to support teachers in reflecting on skill building opportunities, you can ask, what skills were important for your students to use in this lesson's reading? How well did your students use the skills? And what just-in-time supports will you implement prior to upcoming lessons? So now let's synthesize our learning for today. You can click on this Jamboard. We'll provide that link in the chat. And I would like for you to add a blue sticky note for the questions you still have and a green sticky note for practice you can commit to trying. Also a yellow sticky note for something that you have learned. I am going to put the PDF of this slide deck in the chat. Just bear with me 1 second.